All right, guys. I got Shea Pugh on the line, and she has went through some trauma in her life that not a lot of people experience, and she was able to pull through it. And she's living a healthy lifestyle now, and she's there for her family and taking care of 3 kids and a husband. A little bit about her: we went to school together growing up, and she's the owner of a skin spa named Flawless Skin Lounge in Friendswood, Texas. And her life is a ton better from that night that her life changed forever. So, Shea, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you.
How have you been?
I've been good. Life's been great.
That's good. That's good. I'm glad you're able to get over what you need to get over and be there for your children.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's very important.
If you can you just give a brief introduction about yourself and kind of go over the incident that happened?
Yes. So this incident was about 5 years ago. I have 3 kids. Kennedy is 12, Cooper's 10, and then I've added another little one to my bunch. She's about to be 4. But about 5 years ago, 5.5 years ago now, I was in the process of ending my marriage to Kennedy and Cooper's dad. Our marriage had been rocky for a while, but it had gotten very physical. There was drugs involved on his end, and he was just getting to where he was very physically abusive with me. It left me basically at a point where I had to leave that marriage for the safety of me and my kids. It was a very, I thought that was the worst time in my life whatsoever at that point, but it was nothing compared to what would be happening just a couple months later. The divorce was off and on, going through that whole process was almost a year, I think, at that point. And we had attempted mediation 3 different times, and he had to have supervised visitation because he had to go to these psych eval classes and prove that he was clean and he wasn't drinking alcohol and all this stuff. Right. And the weekend that the incident happened, he, for some reason, fought tooth and nail to get Kennedy and Cooper for that weekend. Well, he had not done all of his classes, and I was hell-bent on not letting him take them. I still felt like he was not in a safe place. I just knew in my heart, as a mother, that they should not go with him because I knew he still wasn't right. And so,
what do you mean by you knew he wasn't right?
He was acting just so mentally unstable. A guy that used to work for a computer engineering company that was pretty dang normal, I would say. He's a business guy, was just doing reckless things like wrecking his car, drinking and driving. In his words, whenever we split up, he blew through his entire 401k so that me and the kids would have absolutely nothing. And in his words, he was partying like a rock star. It was just a whirlwind of just partying, drugs, and alcohol. And that was just not the guy that I had married. It was
he was assaulting you on a regular basis?
Yeah.
Or?
Yes. It happened about over a year and a half, 2 years period. And it got to where in the beginning it would not happen in front of the kids. And then it started to happen in front of the kids. And unfortunately they saw things that they did not
Right.
need to see. And, as a wife and a mother, I did my best to try and make things work. And, he would put the blame on me and then I would believe him. And it was your typical abusive relationship. I didn't tell anybody because I felt like if I changed this about me or if I did that our marriage would go on and that, it would get better.
You didn't reach out to your family at all about that?
No, I didn't. I did tell my mom that I was super unhappy in the marriage and, she was there to support me, whatever, but I didn't want to, I was so worried about the stigma of my kids being in a divorced home and separating them on Christmas, and they're my life, and so I thought at the time that what I was doing was the best thing, but it wasn't, and it got to a point where I literally had to jump out of a moving vehicle because he told me he was going to kill me. So that was the turning point for my marriage. And I moved home and I started the divorce and, all that, the stuff that goes along with that. He put me through the ringer with the divorce. It was absolutely awful. We tried mediation 3 different times, and going back to that weekend where he fought tooth and nail to try and get Kennedy and Cooper. And I just knew in my heart that they were not supposed to go. In the end, they did not end up going to his house that weekend, thank God, because that Saturday he killed himself in our home. So he committed suicide, something I never once in a million years believed that he would do, he ended his life, and
Wow.
he left this earth. He left me behind with 2 little kids to care for and try and give them as normal of a life as possible. And that was the end of that. It was, I no longer loved him as my partner, but I loved him as the father of my children.
Right.
That I didn't expect those feelings to ever go away. He helped me become a mother. And I prayed and prayed and prayed that at some point we would be able to have an amicable divorce, or we could co-parent, and that he could be involved in their lives. I truly believe that he would at some point get clean, and that we
Right.
would be able to go about our normal lives, but he never did. And I think in the end, the drugs and just that lifestyle completely took over and is the root of what caused all that in the long run.
That's that's a wild ride right there,
Mhm.
huh? Jeez.
It was bad. It was bad. They were 7 and 5 at the time. That night I got the phone call, and I had moved back down here. I was living with my family in Alvin, and we lived in Cyprus, well, he lived in Cyprus, but we had to go up there, and I had to witness. I had to be there and answer questions, and that whole process in itself, being interrogated
Yeah.
basically by cops that, I think that's another thing. I think it's super important for cops to go through classes
Definitely.
to learn how to show remorse and emotion, because the way that I was treated
Yeah.
that night, I think definitely factored into my whole experience, or the grieving process, I guess you
Um,
could say, in that whole situation. It was,
yeah. I'm very sorry to hear that. Actually, that's one point I go over in one of my episodes, that the stuff that officers see on a daily basis, it takes away empathy. And
mhm.
but but it's not your fault that they didn't show it. You know what I mean? It's
Right.
our fault because we didn't have the proper training to snap back into reality, and out of our own selfishness. Like sometimes I do that sometimes too, and I catch myself every now and then, even though that I know I'm not. That's not how you act. You know what I mean? It's
Yes.
just we see death on a daily basis. We see hard criminals on a daily basis. We have to deal with these guys nonstop, and it just
Mhm.
it kind of makes a rock around our heart, analogy
I
like
can
that.
totally see that. Yeah.
But there's a switch that we have to flip off whenever we deal with people that go through what you went through. And this is really good that that we're talking about this, because I know a lot of law enforcement and first responders are going to be listening to this, and it'll be an eye opener for them, because a lot of them, they don't hear this. They don't hear this side of a victim that has been mistreated by a police officer or a medic or a firefighter, or
Mhm.
somebody who's there to help, and that should be more empathetic to you and your needs.
Right.
And yeah, sorry, I'm very sorry about that.
No, I knew that. Like now, today, I completely understand. Like, I can only imagine the things that y'all see and deal with and experience, especially, when somebody is a suspect and they have a weapon pointed at you, and it's you or them type of thing. But that night, I was a broken wife still at
Right.
that point, and I couldn't believe what I was experiencing and feeling all in one, all at the same time, when I was still trying to grasp the fact that this was real. Like I remember that night I kept
Yeah.
saying, Mom, please tell me this isn't real. Please tell me this is a dream. This isn't real, right? This isn't really happening, right? And sure enough, unfortunately it was. So
So
it was,
I'm sorry to cut you off, but was there a point where whenever you got the first phone call, that's how you
mhm.
got notified, right? By a phone call?
Yes, it was actually
Yes.
my divorce attorney. His
Yep.
attorney contacted my attorney, and my attorney called me.
Gotcha. So whenever you got that initial phone call, what was your initial reaction? Do you remember?
Yes, I remember it like it was yesterday, actually. I had literally just 5 minutes prior dropped my two kids. I dropped them off with my mom and was going back out to hang out, and I got the phone call, and I remember he said, I can hear his tone in my voice. He was in my head. He was like, Shea, I'm drawing a blank of what his name was. he said, you know, are you sitting down? Are you with somebody right now? Are you with your family right now? And I was like, no, I'm not. What's going on? He's like, are you driving? And I was like, no. And at this point, he'd asked me kind of like a few questions. Like he wanted to know if I was with somebody, like family. He wanted to know if I was sitting down. He wanted to know if I was driving. I was like, what's going on? And
Right.
he's like, you know, Jason killed himself tonight. I was like, no, he didn't. He wouldn't. And my first response, no, he didn't. He would never do that.
Yeah.
And he goes, Shea, I'm so sorry. Like, I'm having to tell you this way, but yes, he did. And me, still in just complete shock. I was like, you're joking, right? Like, I couldn't believe what I was truly hearing. Like, I never thought my husband was, he was a little bit, he liked himself a lot. Let me put it that way. He was a little bit on the arrogant side. He was he was confident, let me put it that way. And
Right.
that was one of his good traits about him is he was very confident with himself, you know.
And
So
this is very important to hear because a lot of people, they think that just because, you know, somebody's super confident about themselves or somebody's like, you know, all about themselves, that they wouldn't hurt themselves or they wouldn't go to that level. But
right.
in reality is anybody can do this. And
Yeah.
it just depends on, you know, how much they're pushed and what buttons is pushed on in their lives.
Yep.
And it's good that you said that because especially like first responders, like in my profession, our profession has tons and tons of suicides. And if you speak to them, like they would be super, super all about themselves. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
they're super all about themselves. They're super like, I got to get this done. I got to save this life. I got to do this. I got to do that. Like they know what they're doing. They know like their goal in life is to save lives. It might come off as arrogant, but they're like really
Confident.
confident about the job that they do and how they do it, and they still fall to suicide a lot. You know, and it's really, really important for people to understand that because like family members of policemen or firefighters or any first responders, that would be the last thing that they would think that
Mhm.
their family member would do. And it's important to pick up these red flags and at the very least bring it up to them, you know, and confront them about it. I mean, the worst they can do is say, no, that's not what I'm feeling. Or they can actually be like, yeah, I'm actually going through some shit, you know, and
Yeah.
then you can go from there. And that works for anybody. It don't have to be first responders. Like,
Right.
you know, and it's just like being able to acknowledge that there is a problem and identify what the problem is, if he has depression or anxiety or whatever it is, and get him help for it before it turns into this, you know?
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Never once in a million years did I think he was capable of doing something like that ever. Like I've never once in a million years. It's still to this day, you know, it's just not something he would have done that nobody would
Yeah.
have ever expected him of doing.
So let's talk about your children because your children went through this with you.
They did, yes.
How did it affect them?
Well,
If you don't mind talking about that,
no,
yeah.
I don't mind talking about it all. Today they are thriving. I mean,
Awesome.
they are doing amazing. They are amazing.
That's good to hear.
They are definitely leaders of their little pack. So when we were going through that divorce, I had turned their life upside down when we moved down to Alvin and moved them out of their home and moved them away from their friends, moved them away from, all their friends that they had ever known up in Cyprus. So I immediately got them into some therapy, to help them cope with moving to a new place, being in a new environment,
What
dealing
kind
with
of therapy?
mom.
You don't mind me
It was actually play therapy. It was
Good.
a therapist in Alvin. It was play therapy for just learning to cope with mommy and daddy no longer being together.
Gotcha.
And the
That's
night
very smart,
that,
by the way.
yes, well, I was just so worried about how it would affect the kids throughout the whole process,
Right.
So the night that Jason committed suicide, it was about midnight. I called Jimmy Sue, was our therapist. I called, and of course she didn't answer because I called her business line, and left a message. And she called me back within 25-30 minutes.
That's
Basically,
awesome.
the reason I called her was to say, I need to know what to tell them. This has
Right.
happened. I'm going to Cyprus. When I get home tomorrow morning, my two children are going to have to know that their daddy is no longer alive. I need to know what I can do. What am I supposed to say? Because I knew
That's
that
not something that somebody is prepared to talk about with their kids. Like
No,
who
never.
would think that you would have to say that? You know?
Yeah. I knew that the way that the words were going to come out of my mouth was how they were going to remember it for the rest of their life. So she said, Shea, you just need to tell them that there was a very bad accident and that Daddy passed away. So per the therapist's recommendations, and me just still in shock and everything else. We didn't get home till probably about 3 or 4 in the morning because I had to wait for the cops to do all their stuff in the coroner's office. And then it's an hour wait. We didn't get home till probably 3 or 4 in the morning. Wow. So typically we would wake up on that Sunday and go to church. So, we got up and we weren't getting ready for church. That was already something a little bit off, for them. And my mom and my dad were there. My best friend was there. And I pulled them in the living room and I sat them on my lap in the recliner. And I just held them for a minute and tried to control my emotions. And then I just proceeded to tell them that, their daddy loved them so very much. And, that unfortunately there was a terrible accident the day before and Daddy passed away. They were still pretty small at the time. They were 7 and 5. So for some reason, I'm not really sure why or how, just they took those words and they twisted it that Daddy was in a car accident.
Oh, my
and
gosh.
that they felt that he had passed away in a car accident for a while, for probably about a month or two, because we were going back and forth to the therapist, and I told Jimmy Sue, I was like, they think he's died in a car accident. She's like, Shea, you're going to have to tell them the truth, because if they get older, even if it's 2 years older, they get older and they find out that that's not the way he really died, they will be angry at you. You've hidden this from them, you've lied to them, and they're going to go through a whole nother mourning process. You have to be completely honest with them. She's like, you'll know when it's the right time. I don't think that they're mature enough yet, but you're gonna have to tell them the truth. So my daughter, just the 7-year-old, she's very nosy and intuitive like me. She was asking millions of questions consistently, like, was he drinking and driving? Was he not wearing his seatbelt? What exactly was it that killed him? Did he, did he go through the windshield? And finally one day it was just me and her by ourselves. And I would never answer the questions. I was like, you know what, when you get a little bit older, we'll talk about it. That was my response for a long time, because I didn't feel in my heart it was time for her to know the truth.
It's hard kind of gauging that with kids, because you don't know where their mind's at,
Right. I wanted to make sure she would understand. When I talked to her about what exactly happened, I wanted her to know the whole story, how he started doing drugs, and drugs changed the chemical structure of his brain, which caused his brain to make him do things that he wouldn't typically do, but he still loved us the whole time. It's just, you're walking a thin line on making sure you don't crush her spirit in the way she loved her dad and what she thought of him, because he still walked on water to her, but at the end, he was absolutely awful to her mom, and she didn't remember all that. So it was actually on it was on his 6th birthday. He went home with my mom after his birthday party, and it was just Kennedy and I, and we were in the car, and we hadn't talked about it. It had been a long time, and it was just the two of us, and she goes, are you going to actually tell me how my dad died now? She was she was still 7. She has an old soul. Like, she knows,
Smart girl.
So I was like, this is it. This is the time. So I pulled over. I was in that parking lot in Alvin across the street from McDonald's, that parking lot over there, that old shopping center. And I pulled over, and she was in the back seat. I was like, go ahead and unbuckle your seatbelt, baby, and get up front with me. I want to talk to you about that. And so when she got up front, I started with, you know how much your dad loves you. You were his absolute princess. He loved you so much. And then I just started saying, kind of reminding her, remember how we split up and we were living down here and he was living up there. And do you remember what caused all that? She's like, yeah, y'all would fight a lot. And I'm like, do you remember the fighting? And she was like, yeah, I remember him choking you and hitting you. And I'm like, I'm so sorry that you remember that you witnessed that. I honestly didn't realize that she remembered that, but she does. She does.
Yeah.
And
how old was she then whenever that happened?
She was 5. It started when she was probably about 4.5, 5. And she remembers. She can tell me places in the house. Still to this day, she's like, I remember seeing him choke you in such and such place. I remember him hitting your head on the wood floor in the living room. Like, she remembers. Kids have a better memory than we give them credit for. That's
Oh,
for
definitely.
sure. So
They're sponges at that age.
they are. Yeah, absolutely. And it made me so sad that she remembers that, because I never ever want her thinking that that is a healthy relationship. And we talked about that too. So we spent about an hour in that spot, in that parking spot, and I just told her, she told me how she remembered him being physical with me, and I was like, you're right, and that's why we had to leave, because it just wasn't safe, because Daddy unfortunately started doing drugs, which is not healthy. Drugs completely change a person. He turned into a person that we didn't know, and so then from that I spun off, unfortunately the drugs changed the chemical structure of his brain, and that day he had to have done some drugs, and it pushed him to doing something that he never once in a million years would have done. And I told her that he had a gun, and the gun went off, and she just started crying, and she said, why would he do that? If she was more concerned about why would he do drugs, he knows
Right.
how bad drugs are, because that's her 7-year-old mind. It wasn't like, oh
Right.
my God, he took a gun and he pulled the trigger. It was, why would he start to do the drugs? Because if he hadn't have started to do the drugs, then that wouldn't have happened, and I just held her and was like, he loved you. Don't let that ever change how you feel about him. He was sick,
Definitely.
and he was sick, and he was just so sad, and that's the drugs. He thought the drugs would help him to feel better, and that's where we pretty much,
Yeah,
anytime.
I think you did a great job. Actually, that's
Thank
perfect.
you. Yeah, I put a lot of thought into how it was going to go down.
Right.
I thought it would have been a little bit more planned out than that, not leaving my son's six-year-old birthday. But I just knew, because it was just, we got in that car all happy and everything, and she just, I don't know why at that minute she's like, so are you going to tell me how my dad died? Just kind of like, come on, lady, tell
Yeah.
me. And it was
Yeah.
just the two of us, and I was like, you know what? It's time. I knew
Just
it
felt
was.
right, right?
Yeah, I knew it was time. Cooper came, his came about a year and a half later, when I eventually told him.
How old was he when you told him?
He was probably about 7.5, probably about the same age that Kennedy was, because they're
Oh,
21 months
okay.
apart, and it was his 6th birthday, so it was probably about 7.5. I told him. we went to we went to dinner that night, and some kind of comment was made. I'm trying to remember exactly how that happened, but
He
I knew
brought
it
it
was
up,
time.
or you brought, or?
He brought it something. We were at Joe's barbecue in Alvin, and he brought up
Uh-huh.
something about how his dad died.
Gotcha.
And then Kennedy like looked at me and then looked at him, because she didn't quite know. Because I told her, I was like, Kennedy, you let mommy talk to brother about that. You don't mention this. A grown up needs to talk to your brother about that, and I don't think he's mature enough. I don't think he's old enough to understand
Right.
the consequences of drugs and all that. I don't think he's under old enough to understand all that. So you let mommy handle all that. And so we did our pinky promise, and we went about our thing. And as far as I know, she had never said anything to him. But he made a comment that night at the dinner table, probably about a year and a half later, about how his dad died or something. It was just so matter of fact of like, oh yeah, he was in a car wreck and he wasn't wearing a seatbelt. And I was like, you know what?
Right.
It's time. It's
Yeah.
time, because I didn't want him going on thinking that any longer. It was I just knew in my heart it was time for him to know as
Yeah.
well. So when we got home, I pulled him aside and I told him
Basically the same thing.
basically the same thing. He was not very emotional when Jason died. He was 4 when we separated, and
Right.
they never built that bond, that relationship, because remember, him and our relationship, he had started doing the drugs basically when Cooper was 2. So Cooper was attached to me,
Yeah.
So he hasn't been very emotional throughout this whole process as
Right.
much. He is having some anxiety and some issues now, and he's in therapy for it. I have him
Yeah,
in therapy.
that's what I was about to say.
Yep.
A lot of times children, like from my experience working on the street, like dealing with families that went through this kind of the same issues that you have, the younger they are, they react differently, and it doesn't register in their mind as fast. And after a year or so, like that stuff starts shooting back in them,
Yep.
and it when it comes hard, and they start asking a lot of questions and want to get the facts about everything. But yeah, I mean, I think you did an awesome job with your kids. And are they still? You said they're still going to counseling for it?
Cooper's in therapy now. Kennedy's doing great. If she shows any signs whatsoever of needing therapy, I'll stir right back in there.
Right.
And I'm constantly asking, how are you feeling? How are you doing? Da, 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 da. Like,
That's great.
I am so far up their butts
Yeah. But
that,
I know just I'm not trying to tell you to do anything, but I know that what helps a lot as well, like even though she's not showing anything at home, I mean, it's not to say she's not thinking about stuff, right?
yeah,
I definitely at least once a month just schedule an appointment with her, with the
that's,
therapist, and just,
yeah,
you know what I mean, just for to ease your mind, because a lot of times, like whenever we deal with the youth, a lot of times they don't tell their parents anything, and they shut off from talking to their parents about stuff or friends, and they just keep it all in, and later on, after years go by, it turns into anger, and then it just turns into something different, you know. But not saying that she's doing that. I'm
right,
just saying,
no,
like, you know what I mean. I'm just saying, just for precaution wise,
yes,
I would
yep,
just keep her in there once a month at least. Just, you
yeah,
know, just have somebody professional deal with her for once a month for an hour, and just try to get inside of her head to see where she's at, and that way she can give you the feedback that you need that you may not see
yeah,
yourself. You know.
yep, that's,
Yeah.
you're very right about that. I should
Well,
definitely
I
do
mean, I'm very sorry all that happened. Man, that's some crazy stuff, and you did an awesome job with your kids. I'm just telling you that. And there's a lot of parents that honestly are some of them are selfish, and they don't realize they're selfish, but they just think about themselves, and they totally forget about getting their kids help.
that.
And
Yeah,
then their kids have to deal with it themselves, and they don't know how to deal with it. So they turn to anger, and they get depressed, and that leads to behavioral issues. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
you did an awesome job, and I
thank
commend you for
you,
that.
thanks.
How are you different now than you were before you lost your husband?
Wow, I feel like I'm a completely different person. I wouldn't say like this might sound kind of cliche. I'm like I've proven to myself like what I'm capable of. Going through that whole
Right.
process. My mom said the other day, Shea, I didn't think you were ever going to stop crying. You know, During that
Right.
time, like I cried. My mom had to give me baths. I puked like 10 times a day. Like my best friend pretty much just would stay at my house and just stay in bed with me. She would come and pick up my kids up from school. She took them
That's
to
awesome.
school.
That's
Like
awesome that you
for
have a friend like that.
She did. She lived next door to me whenever I was living with my parents. My family and those friends that were there for me, they were my rock. But I remember like my mom, my friends, whoever, everybody that was coming over, I was throwing up consistently. Like I didn't want to get out of bed. Like I couldn't even bathe myself. I was just so helpless. And my
Right.
mom said, Shay, I didn't think you were ever going to stop crying. But I didn't stop parenting my kids. I was doing that.
That's
When I
good.
was crying, it was when they were outside playing, or, the minute they came in that house, I sucked it up and I put a smile on my face. And if they saw me crying, it was okay. It was because I wanted them to know that, hey, it's okay to be sad. Mommy was just having
Right.
a moment. But it took a while. I was seeing my therapist weekly while Kennedy and Cooper was seeing theirs,
Uh-huh.
and I was having nightmares. I was having just visions. I did see his body, so just
Right.
that vision just was constantly just playing over and over in my head. The scene, everything was just constantly. And she finally was like, Shay, you have severe PTSD. So
Yeah.
I did have to get some medication. I'll get put on some medication for a while, which, you know what? It
Yeah.
helped me. It helped me. And
That's good.
therapy and being medicated for just a little bit, talking about my feelings consistently. I talked about it constantly in church. I just dove very deep in my faith, and
Yeah.
it's been 5 years now, but I know exactly what I'm capable of because I made it through that. During that time, I did not think I could. I didn't think I was going to make it. Like I didn't. It was such a dark time in my life,
That's
and
understandable.
here I
You've been
am
through a lot.
today. Here I am today. Like
And
I'm proof.
it's very important. I'm sorry to cut you off, but it's very important for everybody to hear that you knew that you had to attach yourself to a support system, like the
Absolutely.
churches, the family, the friends, and a lot of people, whenever they go through stuff like this, they shut off, and
Yeah.
they shut off the world, and which a lot of people do because they're worried about the stigma that comes along with it, and they don't want people to judge them by what they're doing. You see what I'm saying? If they seek help, they don't want that in people's head that you're weak
Right.
or whatever. No, it takes a strong person to seek help, and people need to know that. And I mean, otherwise you're just running in circles, and you're going to be like that the rest of your life, and your kids are going to eventually see that, right? See your grief every day, and it's going to affect them emotionally too, which in turn affects everybody in their lives. So what you're doing is awesome, and I'm glad you sought your help that you needed.
Yes. Yeah. I don't know where I'd be today if I hadn't have done all that, honestly.
What would you say? What would you say? What would you say that helped you the most during your hardest times? Like, what was the one thing or the one person, or it could be both, because I have both. What helped you the most get through your grief?
Without a doubt, it was my faith. I never stopped praying. It wasn't clearly that Sunday I didn't go to church, but then next Sunday was Easter Sunday. You bet your butt I still got up and went to church. It was definitely faith, God. I'm very much a Christian, and just consistent prayers. I know thousands of people were praying for me. I felt it. And my family, and it's not just the people that were blood that's my family. It's those people that showed up to my house for days, weeks, sometimes even a couple of months, and they were there for me throughout that whole process. And they didn't even have to come in my room, or they didn't even have to sit on the couch next to me. Some of them just came to my house and they were just there. Right. Okay. Like, I don't even know how long they stayed. Sometimes I was just in my room for just a little bit, and they come in just to let me know they were there, but they just showed up and they were there for me to let me know that they were there. And definitely my faith. People. Yeah, I realized in that process who my friends were, and I realized who were not my friends. So
definitely. I did lose. Going through hard times like this, or any kind of hard times, like anything traumatic, any kind of traumatic event that you go through will definitely weed out the people that are supposed to be in your life and the people that are not supposed to be in your life. And it actually, in a way, it's a positive thing, right? Because,
it's a blessing.
Yeah, it is, because you understand who is going to be there for you through thick and thin, and you understand who's not, and you need to adjust your time accordingly to, you know what I mean, to spend more time with the people that you know that care the most about you. And
absolutely.
Yeah, that's awesome that you had such a strong support system.
I did, and like I said, I lost some friends, and at the time I was like, that what a terrible person that they're not. Yeah. They weren't there for me. Are you kidding? You're telling me you can't come to this memorial service because of such and such excuse, or whatever. And so it made me angry. But now it's like, I'm so glad that person is not in my life. you know?
You make time for what you want to do. It's priorities. So, and I'm glad you're able to see that, and now you got people in your life now that is you got strong bonds with, and you know that they'll be there for you. Absolutely. But is there any books or any anything that helped you get over it?
Man, I read this book. I wish I could think of the name. You would bring that up. Oh my gosh. There is a book about suicide. And my cousin was very close to Jason, and she had a very, very hard time. She had a very hard time coping with his death as well. Right. She read this book about suicide, and then she told me to read it. Maybe it's called Why Suicide. I'm not really sure, but there was no closure for me. Like, I was so angry at him. There's that whole cliche, like, they took the easy way out. That's so wrong of them. Da 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 da. And so, of course, like, I was thinking that same way. I was angry. I was angry at him. Like, how dare him do that to me and his kids, and da 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 da. And so, I read this book. It's something suicide, and I'll have to look it up, and I'll let you know after what it's called. But it really helped me to understand. Like, it gives the statistics, because everybody, I would say 85% of people, well, did he leave a note? Right. And I'm like, well, no. And then I'm saying, oh my God, should he have left a note? Is this normal? Da da da. And I remember walking in the house, and all the cabinets were open. He was OCD. The house was always clean, but all the kitchen cabinets were open. And in this book, it talks about statistics. Like, like 80% of people who commit suicide, it's very sporadic, spur of the moment. They don't even have time to leave a note. It's
Right.
those that leave a note, that's the very few that you hear of leaving a note.
Yeah.
And so it talked about that and how they would do, like, go into a manic depressive, like a very manic thing. Well, totally, like all the kitchen cabinets were open, like all of them wide open.
Right.
He would never do that. He had a manic moment. And so it just talks about, I guess, to try and get you to understand and how, they were truly just, they felt like they didn't deserve to live. And they were just at the lowest of the lows. And they feel like whenever they're taking their lives, that it's basically going to be easier on their family without them. And so it really just kind of changed my perspective. And anytime somebody has said, oh, they took the cowardly way out, I say no, like, really? Do you think that was really the cowardly way out? Because think about how depressed that person was, how awful they felt to have been able to pull that trigger or to take those pills. Do you really think they took the easy way out? Because that took some guts, know? And so that book really, I feel like, helped change my perception. It helped me to understand it. I don't know that I would say it brought me closure, but it definitely helped me to understand suicide more. The turning point for me, honestly, was this sermon in church one Sunday, and it was about forgiveness. I was very angry at him still, even though I understood why he did it. But after he committed suicide and all this stuff was coming out, like, I was just finding more and more bad things that he had done to me in our marriage, like when things were good. Like, he'd been cheating on me throughout all this time, and I just found out some horrible, horrible things. And so it just made me even more angry at him because I couldn't yell at him or anything after the fact, And so there was a sermon at church about forgiveness and letting go, and that whenever you forgive and let go of these different situations and have an open heart, like, it'll bring you peace. And so I just broke down. My friend was actually working at the church at the time, and Tiffany Van Sant. Do you remember Tiffany Groman?
Yeah.
She was a prayer partner, and that sermon I broke down and cried. I hadn't cried in a little while. It'd been it's been a couple months that I hadn't cried that hard. I cried so hard that day, and I walked up to her and I said, Tiffany, I'm ready. She's like, you're ready for what? I was like, I'm ready to forgive him for doing this to us. And we just went to the side and we prayed, and I have had just a peace in my heart ever since, because I feel like he's at peace now. I don't know. Like, I feel like we're all at peace now. So
well, that's an awesome feeling to have after something traumatic like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely. I'm glad you're able to get it from a message from your support system, like, which was the church, and that's awesome that you had a friend there that took you in and prayed with you on the side and comforted you during that time too.
Mhm.
Yeah,
It was
definitely.
Yeah, that was a big moment. I remember that moment. Throughout a lot of that whole process, a lot of it's blurry, I guess, because I was just so, I don't know, just so emotional, and it was just so surreal, and it just felt like a dream for so long. But there was definitely aha moments throughout that whole process that's gotten me to where I am today, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. When I went through my stuff, I had one of those moments where I had broken down and I just cried uncontrollably, and afterwards I felt a lot better. I was still, I just went through trauma, but I mean, it was like a bricks just left my shoulders after that happened, and it kind of opened the door for me to dive more into why I was feeling certain ways. And so, yeah, I mean, that's awesome that happened to you. Do you have any, like, hard times now? Like, I know, like, for me, I still have some hard times when we call them triggers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, with me, I got in multiple shootings, but one particular shooting was when a guy was stabbing another man with a woman and a man with a knife, and I had to shoot him while he was doing that. So, like, whenever I would see, like, knives that like, not small knives wouldn't do it for me. It was big knives, because he had a big steak knife, and it was like 9 inches. The blade was like 9 inches. So, like, whenever I would, like, see, like, big knives, I'd be super alert, and I would know where that knife was at all times. You know what I mean? Do you have, like, triggers like that now?
I definitely would say that I have triggers. Because, like I said, I saw his body that the whole thought of seeing death, a dead person, even a coroner's van, a hearse. There's been several funerals, unfortunately, in my life that I've needed to attend. It's actually debilitating for me. I have the worst anxiety. I feel like I'm going to throw up. My palms are sweaty. I'm shaking uncontrollably. Anytime that there's death around or I have to go to a funeral, anything like that, it really, really affects me. But, I put my big girl panties on.
Yeah.
I have me a prayer. I say me a prayer, and I make that appearance that I'm supposed to make. But it's very, very hard on me to
I bet.
to do those, to witness those things, see those things.
So real quick, have you heard of CBT? It's called cognitive behavioral therapy.
No.
Okay, so I'm gonna give you some homework.
Okay. Yes,
so
I'm ready for it.
Definitely, look that up and look up whoever's around you that you feel comfortable, like a therapist that provides that. And I would definitely do that. Just because with me, nothing helped. Nothing. I mean, nothing. I went to therapy for years, and the department paid for me to go to Sam Houston State University.
Oh wow.
And I took my wife there, but at the time she was my girlfriend. But whenever I went up there, we stayed up there for, I believe it was 4 nights, and it was a group of 12 officers, and they're all around Texas that came down, and one by one, we all told our stories, and one by one, he pulled us away. This is over the course of 4 days, and one by one, he pulled us away on one-on-one time with him. And what it does is it separates you from that incident, and you're basically looking down on that incident, and you're understanding every little detail about that incident and what happened and why you felt certain ways. And I mean, you really can't explain it like to the fullest, but when after that day, my wife automatically was like, I see a huge change in you. And like at night, oh my God, at night, I would wake up swinging like crazy, all kinds of stuff. I was going through it. Afterwards, I wasn't waking up swinging. I was still, twitching every now and then at night. I was still like, having some dreams, whatever, but it was not anywhere close to what I was. And like now when I see like big knives and stuff, I'm aware still, but I don't get anxious. I don't have anxiety to the point where like I have to sit down, because back then I did, or I'd have to leave the room. And I don't get to the point where my life stops and I have to change what I'm doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And also like in the military, like, I had an incident where a wooden fishing boat crashed into our ship, and I saw everything, and I believe it was 13 guys on board died right in front of me, and I was watching the whole thing, and so I heard the wood cracking, I heard the men screaming, they were calling for help. I saw everything, and I couldn't do anything because I was 98 feet in the air. By the time our response unit got there, there was no survivors. So now, all those years up until now, when I hear like wood breaking or a cracking of a baseball bat or shit like that, oh my God, like I would start fucking shaking. I would clench up. It was real. And so those are triggers, and for the audience, people that have gone through trauma usually have triggers, and y'all need to be aware, especially if it's a family member. You need to reach out and see what those triggers are for them. That way you can kind of be mindful of that and try to stop, like, if there's a certain behavior or a certain movement or certain words or anything like that are triggers, you can control yourself to the point where, hey, I know he acts like, or he sees this as a trigger, so let me not do this type thing. So yeah, that's just my 2 cents on that.
I never realized that that's what it was called, like a trigger. I just know that that's how I feel. So thank you for teaching me that.
Oh, for sure.
And I'll definitely look that up for sure.
For sure. And also, like, during this whole time, have you ever had like an uncontrollable shaking of the hands or legs or anything?
During that time, like right now, no. During that time, like when I was grieving, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's called a tremor, and that so you were suffering from tremors, which is just normal.
And
People,
whenever I'm around, like whenever I have to attend a funeral or something, I still to this day I will feel that. Yes, absolutely.
yeah. So that's what that is, and it's normal, and there's nothing that I haven't found anything that could help with that besides the CBT I told you about. It helped me a lot with both of those, but it didn't cure it 100%. You know what I mean? It dialed it down 80% though. Like it dialed it down a lot. So I would just totally reach out to a therapist that does that, and I would definitely I support that 100%. Put it that way.
I would definitely look into that for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And then after you do some sessions of that, reach out to me and let me know how it goes for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna look that up and see where there's somebody that supports that around here for sure.
Definitely. And are there any like resources that you reached out to back then that helped you along the way?
My therapist was all the way in Cyprus, and I loved her so much. I drove back and forth to her weekly from Alvin, so it's like an hour, 15-minute drive. Her name was Cynthia Carter, and she was amazing. She's the one that, diagnosed me with the PTSD. She helped talk me through everything. If I was constantly, like I said earlier, I was constantly having nightmares. I would have a nightmare, and in this dream, he would come up and he would be in his body like the way I witnessed the last time I saw him, and he'd come up and whisper in my ear, "Boom" or "Pow," like for a gunshot. It just horrible, horrible dreams, and so I could just call her anytime and just talk to her, and she just really helped me through all that. That book, that suicide book, I cannot remember the name. I'm gonna find it and I'm gonna send it to you because it really helped me to understand.
Definitely. And for the audience, whenever I find out what book it is, I'll post it on the episode and under the comment section.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to find that book for sure.
Well, I appreciate you spending the time, and I know you're a busy lady, full family and running a business and having a husband, and I know you're busy. I appreciate the time. Definitely.
No problem. No problem. If I can just help anybody learn to deal or cope or, just kind of understand what somebody feels and how this is normal and how you can for sure come out on the other side, then I know that I've done my due diligence. And, it makes it all worth it.
Definitely. That's what it's all about, right? That's why I'm doing this. And with your story, that was powerful. And with your story, I know there's people out there that may not have gone through the same exact thing, but they're going through trauma, and there's a bunch of, I call them nuggets, that they can take away from, your coping skills, how you dealt with your kids, how you dealt with explaining to them how their father passed away, to where you reached out for help, your family, churches. People need to hear that. A lot of people are stuck. Their mind is blank right now because it's full of negative stuff, negative thoughts, and they don't understand. They don't have an outlet. So by you saying that, definitely that it's a good thing, and it'll give them options.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely don't think you should go through something traumatic alone by any means. So.
Definitely. Well, that's it. Can you tell us where our listeners can connect with you online?
Yes. I'm on Facebook, Shea, Pugh. My business is Flawless Skin Lounge, and that's in Friendswood, Texas. It's a full-service med spa. The website is flawlessskinlounge.com. You can reach out to me through there, or feel free to find me on Facebook. And I'm always willing to answer questions. Do you have
a Facebook site for your business as well?
Yes, Flawless Skin Lounge, and that's in Friendswood, Texas.
Got you. All right, man. Well, I appreciate you. I appreciate the time.
Not a problem. It's great chatting.
Oh, definitely. You have a good night.
Thanks. Bye.
All right.
All right, guys. Hopefully y'all enjoyed that episode. I know I did. I learned a lot. Just so you know, that book that she was talking about that was her turning point it's called Why Suicide by Eric Marcus, and it's on Amazon. I just ordered it for myself, and hopefully I'll learn some new stuff after that read.